Canım bir şey çekiyorsun be.
Emredin sultanım, hemen bulup getireyim.
Lakin kimse duymamalı. Biraz hünkâr mısın? Kahve. Canım mis gibi kahve çekiyor.
Did you know that there's a real possibility that this scene could have actually taken place in the Ottoman Palace?
Adına kahve diyorlar. Mutlaka tatman lazım. Bakalım beğenecek misin?
Neymiş bu kahve?
Birazdan kokusu bütün odayı saracak. Hadi gel oturalım.
Coffee. One of the most global beverages in the world. While the way it is consumed, served, and its taste vary across cultures and nations, the love for coffee has remained unchanged even today, and it was the same in the past. But what about Turkish coffee? Turkish coffee was inscribed on UNESCO's Intangible Cultural Heritage List, securing its place as a global cultural treasure. And today we are going to explore the history of Turkish coffee. Of course, based on the academic and official sources, I will guide you through the journey of Turkish coffee from its discovery all the way to the present day. But first, we need to start with the discovery of coffee. How was coffee discovered? The origin of coffee traces back to the Kaffa region of Ethiopia. According to legend, a shepherd named Kaldi noticed that one of his normally lazy goats became energetic after eating the berries from a specific tree. Curious, he boiled and drank the berries himself, and thus coffee discovered. Another belief holds that Prophet Solomon, during his travels, saw people suffering from an unknown illness, and following the command of Gabriel, gave them coffee beans brought from Yemen. The people were cured. Yet, another account comes from a Sufi from Moha named Al-Shadhili. He survived in the desert, eating and drinking nothing but coffee. Healed a disease similar to scabies, and his students learned of coffee's benefits and spread it to Moha. Whichever story is true, coffee became a part of human life. Initially, it was used not as a beverage, but as a food. In ancient times, people made bread with coffee and carried the energy-giving berries dried for travel. It was also valued as a type of medicine, and its name is generally believed to come from the Kaffa region where it was cultivated. The spread of coffee across the world. Coffee traveled from Ethiopia to Yemen and then to the rest of the world. In the 14th and 15th centuries, Sufi dervishes in Yemen used coffee to stay awake during night prayers, which popularized its consumption as a brewed drink. It is said that coffee arrived in Yemen from Mecca or Medina. In the 16th century, coffee reached the Ottoman Empire, specifically Istanbul. According to sources, it was first served to Sultan Süleyman by the Yemeni administrator Özdemir Pasha. Initially consumed in the palace, coffee soon spread among the wealthy and later to the lower classes. Some sources claim that coffee was brought to Istanbul by Sultan Selim I after the Egyptian expedition. While exactly who discovered and spread it is uncertain, one thing is clear. Coffee quickly became beloved in the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire valued coffee so highly that the water used to prepare coffee for the Sultan was brought from the Gümüşsuyu fountain on Eyüp Hill in Istanbul. The palace had an official position called Kahvecibaşı, responsible for coffee. For example, Kahvecibaşı Nakşi Mustafa Ağa served in the palace as both a poet and a skilled coffee master, showing that being a kahvecibaşı was not ordinary job. Palace kitchen records also show coffee and its prices. Ground coffee costs 4 dirhams, approximately 12 1.8 grams per 1 akçe. At that time, 1 akçe could buy about 1.5 kilogram bread or half a kilogram of mutton. Coffee quickly spread from the Ottoman Empire to Europe. In the early 17th century, through Ottoman merchants, it first reached to Italy and then France. Coffee houses opened in cities such as Paris, Vienna, and London, and coffee became part of European social life. However, most coffee production and trade routes were controlled by the Ottomans. Europeans sought direct access to the source, sizing seeds and saplings and transporting them to the Far East, the Caribbean, and Latin America. By the 18th and 19th centuries, coffee had transformed from a local beverage into a global agricultural commodity. Brazil quickly became the world's largest coffee producer, and coffee evolved from a ritual drink into a global symbol of culture and trade. Now, let's return to Istanbul a few centuries ago. The story of who brought coffee to Istanbul and who first drank it varies, but either way, coffee arrived and became highly popular. In the Ottoman Empire, it began to be consumed as a pleasurable substance. In the 16th century, coffee houses began to appear in Istanbul. According to sources, the first coffee house opened in Tahtakale. Hakem from Aleppo and Shams from Damascus brought coffee to Istanbul and operated the city's first coffee house. Coffee quickly became popular both in the palace and among the public. Coffee houses became new centers for conversation, literary debate, and social life. By the end of 16th century, there were over 600 coffee houses in Istanbul. According to Evliya Çelebi, there was a coffee house in Topkapi Palace for Sultan's mother Kösem Valide Sultan. However, coffee was sometimes banned during the reigns of Murat III, Ahmet I, and Murat IV. Coffee was prohibited. Coffee was so popular that the French writer Edmondo noted that in Istanbul, one did not need to look for coffee. If you shouted "coffee man," a coffee seller would bring it to you. Coffee houses varied structurally. In summer, one could drink coffee along the Bosphorus, and there were winter, portable, and unattached coffee houses. These places brought together diverse groups, janissaries, poets, and ordinary people. They played games like backgammon and chess and engaged in conversation. They discussed politics, shared opinion about the Sultan, and debated social and economic issues. One of the main reasons of coffee bans was these political discussions. Another reason concerned the religious perspective on coffee's energizing effects. At times, coffee was banned because Islam prohibits the consumption of substance roasted to a certain degree. Although some viewed coffee houses as a threat for political and religious reasons, they did not disappear. While the reason for banning coffee changed over time, it became integrated to the society. Despite repeated prohibitions, people maintained their coffee habits for centuries. Coffee was not only banned for religious reasons. In some societies, it was also restricted due to concerns over health. Over time, people grew accustomed to it, and a new form of social life emerged among the public. People could socialize regardless of rank. Coffee houses were not just for drinking coffee, they served many functions and became social gathering points. Did you know that the first coffee house in Britain was opened in London by a Turk? Of course, when coffee first arrived, coming from east, it was met with some suspicion. There were even so much resistance that it led to the king ordering coffee houses to be closed. Over time, however, this attitude softened and Turkish coffee began to be enjoyed. But that part is another and more detailed story. Now, let's return to Istanbul. What happened in the coffee houses? For example, Karagöz and Hacivat Shadow Place were performed. There were theatrical performances and musical recitals. Tobacco was smoked, and the hookah became an indispensable companion to coffee. According to sources I read, books, magazines, and newspapers were sold in coffee houses. For this reason, they were also called reading houses, kıraathane. It is even said that Sultan Süleyman had history books written specifically to be read in coffee houses. Over time, coffee houses reached such a level that they became full-fledged venues frequented by intellectuals, hosting important literary figures, and carrying foreign magazines. Later, neighborhood coffee houses emerged. These were not just social spaces, they functioned almost as small administrative centers for the neighborhood. Coffee houses were central not only to politics but also to literature and music. Folk poets gathered here, and being a poet was considered a skill. In fact, their leaders received salaries from the state. There were also janissary coffee houses, starting from the 17th century. As janissaries began to marry, these coffee houses became their centers in civilian life. Symbols of the janissary units, such as ships, swords, and fish, were displayed on the doors. It even became a tradition to gift a canary to newly opened coffee houses as a sign of good luck. And of course, all these spaces I described were for men only. What about women? In all the coffee houses, images and miniatures you see, there are only men, because for a long period, women did not enter coffee houses. In other words, coffee houses were entirely male spaces. But this does not mean women did not drink coffee. They would gather in baths or homes to enjoy it. Women loved coffee so much that access to it was a necessity. Some sources even state if a husband refuses to bring coffee to his wife, it is grounds for divorce. In the palace, coffee held a completely different significance. Serving coffee during ambassadorial receptions was one of the greatest symbols of Ottoman hospitality. Presentation was very elaborate. Coffee sets included cups inlaid with silver and emeralds. In the harem, coffee was among the favorite beverages of women. At first, it was expensive and luxurious, so it was not easily accessible, but as trade increased, it became more widespread. Preparing and serving coffee in harem required a ceremonial process. Specially trained concubines would prepare the coffee and served it in decorated cups. This ceremony demonstrated that coffee was not a merely drink, but also a status symbol. Outside the harem, we know that sultans also enjoyed coffee very much. By the end of 17th century, offering coffee to state officials before meetings had became a tradition. The service was presented on golden trays with cups adorned with precious stones. Records even mentioned that coffee was served after the wedding of Sultan III's daughter following the marriage ceremony. By the 19th century, the scale had grown even larger. For example, the Sultan's mother had 3 separate coffee attendants. Wealthy families had a similar setup. The number of staff responsible for coffee could reach 7. This was partly to showcase wealth to guests. How is it different from other coffees? Turkish coffee uses Arabica beans, especially of Yemeni origins. What makes it special is the grind finesses and brewing methods. The coffee is ground extremely fine, almost the consistency of flour. It is roasted to a medium degree in a jazve small pot, served with a small accompaniment like water to cleanse the palate. And Turkish delights. Foam is very important. Coffee without foam is considered careless. It is a slow brewing and slow drinking beverage. A measure of coffee powder and a cup of water are placed in jazve. Sugar can be added according to preference. Initially stirred once, then left to itself, otherwise the foam does not hold. It has its special cup, the fincan. At that time, cups had no handles. Later they became handle, and saucer cups. After drinking, the residue left at the bottom is called telve, coffee fortune telling. Fortune telling was not exclusive to coffee. Many methods existed in the past, although it is unclear exactly when coffee fortune telling began. It is thought to have emerged during the period when coffee was widely consumed and not prohibited in the Ottoman Empire. So let's start the fortune telling. First, you need to drink the coffee. Telve remains at the bottom. Cover the cup, turn upside down, but the direction in which the cup is turned also affects the meaning. Towards the heart, like this. Love and emotions, away from drinker, work, travel, and worldly matters. Like this. With the objects such as ring, keys, or considered placed on it. Wait for it to cool. You need to check it from here. If it's cool, it means it is ready. And then you can read your fortune. The shapes formed by the telve are interpreted as a symbol using imagination. Fortune telling is a way to start a conversation, boost morale, and build social connections. The Turkish saying, "Do not believe in fortune telling, do not be left without fortune," reflects this. The fortune-telling tradition became popular among women from the 17th century onward in home gatherings. It developed alongside other methods like palm reading, water divination, and star reading. Some researchers link coffee fortune-telling to tasseomancy or tasseography, the practice of interpreting symbols adapted from more general fortune-telling traditions. Lady Mary, the wife of British ambassador living in Istanbul in 18th century, mentions in her letters that Turkish women drank coffee in baths, describing the bath as a women's coffeehouse. And today in Turkey, Turkish coffee is served almost everywhere. In homes, restaurants, hair salons, and even Starbucks. During engagement ceremonies, the tradition of the bride serving salty coffee to the groom continues symbolically. Coffee houses still remain male gathering spaces. Coffee fortune telling is a pleasant social activity, regardless of whether one believes in it or not. According to some sources, Hürrem Sultan found coffee too strong and drank it with Turkish delights. Sometimes she even preferred to mix the delights into her coffee. This special recipe gradually became known as Hürrem Sultan coffee. However, this information is not based on academic sources. You can order Turkish coffee plain, medium, or sweet, but that's not the end of the story. There are actually around 40 different types of Turkish coffee, like dibek coffee, menengiç coffee, mastic coffee, myrrha, and other exotic varieties include lavender, saffron, and even chickpea coffee. There are also different brewing methods like közde or sand, and even in ash. So, what is your favorite coffee? Do you enjoy Turkish coffee? Do you like it? And that's it for today. Don't forget to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. I would be very happy if you liked the video and subscribe my channel. See you in the next video. Bye!